the one. For more on the matchup, we say hello and welcome into a man who took it in first hand. CBS Sports combat analyst Luke Thomas joins us now. Luke, what a show it was. You, Brian Campbell, did a great job in the days leading up, sort of telegraphing what would happen, and it all comes to fruition. Body shots, late round finish by Canelo. Your general reaction to what happened is what?
I actually feel like Caleb Plant made a pretty strong account of himself in a lot of important ways, right? I mean, the fight went into the 11th round, the championship rounds. He was able at certain points to win some rounds. I thought that some people have an argument for the first. I gave him about 3 rounds total, but there were some other rounds that were pretty close. There was definitely also some rounds where he was just a little bit busier and landing some great stuff. So it wasn't like he got completely blown out, kind of grinded out a little bit at times. But in the end, the firepower of Canelo Alvarez, the great game planning with his trainer, Eddie Reynoso, you saw it going to the body over and over again, high guard, walking him down. He was just way too much for Plant, even if I grant that, Plant performed quite ably tonight. Yeah, not just a fantastic game plan here by Canelo, but the discipline to stay on that game plan throughout into those championship rounds, as you mentioned. Oftentimes when you get to this point in your career and you're setting guys up in front of an all-time great like Canelo and he's knocking them down one after another, it does not become Canelo versus insert name here. It's Canelo versus ghosts. It's Canelo versus greats. And so much of the lead up to this fight, Luke, was where Canelo Alvarez stood in terms of the greatest Mexican-born boxers of all time. He becomes the first to unify 4 belts here at 168, the first Mexican-born fighter to do so, Luke. Where does he rank? Not that you have to put a number next to it right now, but what does this fight do in terms of... And he stopped Kovalev with strikes in that fight, too, I believe in the 11th round as well. So this guy's power carries late, even up another weight class. I mean, folks, listen, 4-weight division, first to unify 168, as you indicated. I just feel like if you look at his resume and you look at the quality of opposition and now the length of it, and again, 31 years of age, I can also remind you, he has never been down on the canvas. You look at his defensive skills. Does he have the same length of resume as, like, say, a Chavez? No. But I think if you just add up the accomplishments and some of the rare air that he now occupies, there's only a handful of fighters who have ever unified a weight class in the 4-belt era at all. He now joins them as well, and only 31. Even if you want to grant that a Chavez is ahead by virtue of the overall volume in the body of work, and perhaps you could, there is certainly a debate to be had about that. I think he smokes everyone else in that competition. And I also have to say, again, 31 years of age, he's not done, folks. He looked to be in his prime. I think he's got several more years of terrorizing some divisions. So I think by the time he's done, even if you don't want to grant him that tonight, I think it will be inevitable by the time he hangs up the gloves. This guy is one of the best boxers, and I mean this, in boxing history, and he is in his prime. Look out, folks. Yeah, sometimes the fractured nature of boxing these days can lead us to wonder things. Saul Canelo Alvarez leaving no doubt in the minds of those who watched on this given night and over the last decade plus. Luke, you touched upon it a little bit there, the way that Caleb Plant came out and showed well for himself. It's been line the guy up and knock the guy down for Canelo. Where does Plant rank in terms of the type of tests put in front of Alvarez? Because it was not cut and dry for Canelo, as you mentioned. He did have to work for the win tonight. In some ways, I would put this as maybe the most difficult. It's a little bit debatable, right? So you have Rocky Fielding, who he just bulldozed, no big deal whatsoever in that sense. Then you had Callum Smith, who went the distance but was kind of just overwhelmed, and I'm not going to say coasted, but did enough to survive. So that was a difficult challenge, but Canelo couldn't quite put him away. Saunders was showing a little bit of razzle-dazzle until he got his face broken in about the 8th. This was an interesting one because Canelo was just investing. He wasn't, demonstrably rocking his head back all that often. He actually was having a little bit of trouble finding the perfect lane for that left hook. In fact, the ending took place when he was able to take half a step back, and even though the glove was up, the punch came right in front of it, just enough to cause problems. And then it was that same right uppercut, by the way, that broke Billy Joe Saunders' face. That's the one that caused the problems here for Caleb Plant in the end. So a lot of the same things. But I would say the fact that Caleb Plant made Canelo work for it in the way that he did, and even took some rounds from him, I actually would call this the most difficult. Saunders was getting to that before he got stopped, but the full completion, even though Caleb Plant got stopped, I would actually say the bigger, broader work there showed that he was probably the toughest one of the 4. Yeah, admirable effort, but he does head home 1 belt light. But
some pockets that have heavied up big time over the last hour or so. Lucas, we take a look at what's ahead for Canelo. He said it in the ring after this one with 4 belts on his shoulders. Rest is what's next, and he deserves it. 4 fights over the last 11 months, says he might get outplay at tea time here on Sunday. But when you look forward to what is the next mountain for Canelo to climb, where does he find that next test?
I really am not entirely sure. Now, the rest is very well deserved. I mean, talking about some of the greats, Canelo competed 4 times in 11 months this year. I mean, folks, if you have a champion in their prime and they're competing 2 or even, let's say, 3, that's a treat. 4, I'm not going to say it's unheard of, but it is not common whatsoever. And so now I think that they have to figure out exactly what's appropriate for them. Listen, there are some fights they could still make in this weight class, or maybe even 160 if you want to go back there. Potentially Charlo, I know, is out there asking for a potential opportunity. We'll see if that comes to fruition. David Benavidez, also a PBC fighter, not too far, I think, from these kind of conversations. Well, he needs another win or 2. So they could still do that depending on what they want to do. But the one that he has mentioned, him and his team, and it's the one that I find the most interesting, if also the most implausible, is Beterbiev up at 175 pounds. This Russian hammer, a guy who looks like he is chiseled out of stone in that weight class. And yes, obviously Alvarez has that win over Kovalev at 175, but Kovalev a little bit longer than tooth when they fought. To Beterbiev, I mean, this guy, he's a little bit older because he started a little bit later, but he is very, very tough and huge, even for that weight class. It wouldn't even make Canelo a lot of sense for him to go and fight him because he gets nothing out of it other than bragging rights. But Joe, this is the guy who is doing the things that some champions refuse to do, are reluctant to do, don't want to do. They don't want to go up in weight. They don't want to try and unify. Canelo wants all the smoke. So they've talked about it before. We'll see what happens, but don't lose sight. 175 Beterbiev, that could be something quite interesting.
Luke, we can't say it enough, my friend. Great work the entire week. We appreciate you weighing here on the tail end of this exciting bout between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant. Thank you as always. We'll be looking forward to the podcast coming up this week on The Morning Combat. Make sure you get it in your ears. Do yourself a favor on the tail end of all of combat sports. Luke Thomas, Brian Campbell break it all down each and every day on The Morning Combat. Anywhere there is a bell, a clock, and punches being thrown, these 2 guys got you covered. Download, subscribe, and enjoy The Morning Combat.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.